if you're new to the language, here's how you would start, here's how you would finish, and kind of just help you along the way versus just hunting and pecking and figuring out what is what. It's the gap between how do I write this tag to how do I make something.
Welcome back to the show. Today we've got an exciting episode about Learn CF in a Week, which is an amazing website, free training. Oops, I let the cat out of the bag there on how it's priced. And I've actually got 3 experts who help put together Learn ColdFusion in a Week. We've got Dan Fredericks of the North Virginia CFUG. We've got Dave Ferguson, who's joining us from sunny California, and Carl von Stetten, and I'm forgetting where in the country you are, Carl.
California as well.
Another sunny Californian.
He's on the other end.
At the other end of California. The Republic of Northern California. So, cool. Well, glad you all could join us here. And I think we should start off because not everyone knows what this thing is, Learn CF in a Week. What exactly is it?
I'm going to let Dave mention this because Dave is one of the originals. Just a quick history that Dave was part of this originally when they put it together 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a while.
And then he realized that it needed to be upgraded. So he conned or asked both Carl and myself to join in, and we've been sort of helping administer putting the new thing together. So Dave can probably give you a better sense of where Learn CF in a Week came from.
Yep, conned with cookies is probably a good thing, but I still haven't given you the cookies. So backstory, like Dan said, Learn CF in a Week was started a long time ago to try and bridge the gap between somebody wanting to learn the language and just reading help documentation. We can go all online and go to CF Docs and wherever else you want to figure out how to write certain tags and so on and so forth. But there was nothing to really say, if you're new to the language, here's how you would start, here's how you would finish, and kind of just help you along the way versus just hunting and pecking and figuring out what is what. So originally started by, who was
Simon.
it? Simon Free. He spearheaded the initial write, and he got a whole bunch of us involved. We all wrote little pieces and parts and things like that. But it was written for an older version of ColdFusion. I think,
I believe it was CF10.
CF10, maybe, yeah, originally. And then as CF versions came out, it wasn't really upgraded. And there wasn't much in the language that changed drastically that really needed it to be upgraded. But with the most recent version of CF 2018, we're like, you know what? We really need to revamp this and make it more modern in the examples, and not only the website itself, but the examples that it shows and so on and so forth. So I think, what was it? Couple CF summits ago, I approached Dan and Carl and said, hey, I got this idea. What do you guys think? And they're like, good idea. Like, great. Fast forward a year, we really didn't make much traction because we were trying to find a lot of people to help us with it. We eventually, after a year of poking and prodding people, we finally got Adobe on board to help out with some stuff. We got a lot of other people involved to help write it, but not necessarily fully rewrite it, just redo the examples to make them more current. So ultimately, like I said, it's the gap between how do I write this tag to how do I make something, and just trying to help people along the way to get their foot in the door of writing the language that we all know is very simple to write but hard to master.
That is great. I don't know if, Carl, you wanted to add anything to that? Or?
No, well, we did get a pretty good mixture of original contributors reviewing their sections, and where some of the original contributors have now moved on to other languages or other jobs that aren't involving ColdFusion as much anymore. We were able to find other community members to review those original sections. So it's still a work in progress. The new version of it isn't available yet, but it will be soon. And I think the next thing we have to do is we also need to go through the actual hands-on the course, the practical lab material and get that stuff a little bit refreshed as well. But the actual course pages themselves are pretty close to being ready to go.
So if someone goes to learn in CF in a week, it's an online course or it's an ebook or what?
It's currently there is an ebook offered, but I'm not sure we're going to continue offering that once we're done with the rewrite. Currently is an online course that you can just go through step by step. There's a PDF to get all the material as well. But yeah, the ebook may fall by the wayside. And
there's some sample files too, I think.
Yep. Yeah, there's a whole ton of samples. The entire site itself, as well as all the samples, will be available on GitHub, so everybody can just poke through there, as well as So I'll touch some more on that later. But yeah, it's all there.
And so this is like comprehensive training to get someone up to speed on ColdFusion. Is that the idea?
Yeah. Yeah. And in the company I work for, that's when we hire somebody new that has no ColdFusion experience, they have to go through this course. That's their first thing they do.
And how's that work? Do they actually come out at the end of a week really being able to code in ColdFusion?
Yeah, to the extent that we need them to jump into our system and write code, maybe not. Our system's really advanced, but it gives them a better understanding of what is what and how things interconnect versus, like I said, looking at some tags and doing a search on what is CF output. It kind of helps put all that together, so when they look at code, it doesn't look so weird, for sake of a better term.
That's amazing. I mean, usually training for a week costs thousands of dollars. How much does it cost to learn CF in a week?
It's free, 100% free.
100% free. All
yes.
Right.
We charge you nothing. We get nothing except your smiling face that you learned something new.
And it's open source as well. Is that true? Or?
Yes, it is.
So anyone who wants to help improve it, or you can help out, be one of those famous contributors on your contributor page.
Yes. So once we get it all up and running, right now the submission is closed. But once we get it all done, we'll open it up and allow anybody to do pull requests into it to make modifications that they might think we should use. To not only just the examples, but the site itself. So,
and hopefully we'll get more people doing that as well when they see that our English was not 100% perfect in a sentence structure, or they see a better example would be X instead of what we use. So hopefully we will get more community involvement with that as well.
Yep.
So this originally came out around 2010, somewhere around there? Or?
Yeah, right around I think it was a little after the release of CF10. So yeah, right around that area.
So is it for all versions of ColdFusion, or it's only for the latest one? Or
we updated the samples to match the latest version,
mm-hmm.
but ColdFusion is very well known to be very backwards compatible. So it will work going backwards. However, there may be code in there that if you're using an older version of ColdFusion may or may not work for you.
I would say, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, it probably supports all the versions that Adobe supports, so 11, 2016, and 2018. That's
probably a fair statement to make.
And then what about Lucee? If someone's coding in that, is it good for them too, or is it only for Adobe ColdFusion?
Well, like I said a little bit ago, Adobe helped us out with some of this. So there are some considerations we had to make with doing that. So there aren't any Lucee examples. It's all written for Adobe CF, but the majority of it, I don't see why it wouldn't work in Lucee. There may be some slight variances, but those aren't noted in the site itself.
Cool. So tell me about some of the cool features in Learn CF in a week.
Well, I think each chapter, once you get through sort of the introductory material, each chapter will walk you through a fairly basic explanation of one particular facet of the language and the features. And then you'll go through, some of the sections have more than one subsection, maybe one or up to like, I think the longest section may have 6 subsections. And then you get into the hands-on exercises. So you'll take the sample code and you'll start to, it'll give you instructions on how to modify that code to accomplish what the goal of that hands-on session. And then each one builds on the previous one. So for an end user, if they get stuck, if they can't quite get something working, there are solutions in the hands-on code as well. So they can go sneak a peek at the solution, figure out maybe what they weren't quite doing right, and then they can move on to the next one.
And from a high level, you think about if you looked at Adobe ColdFusion and you said, what do I need? What are the main topics in that, which, we always talk about our decision-making and our scopes or our data types, how to query the database, what is application CFC. Then you get into other things such as ORM and caching and big topic of security. So from what I know, those were the big topics that people talked about when they first put this together. And we didn't change any of those topics. We kept all the ones that were there originally, just so that if you needed to build an app from 0 to 100%, these topics will be able to help you.
Yep. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Dan, but I think we're moving to have right now, if you go to the site, there's a lot of install instructions. And we're going to replacing those with using command box.
Hopefully this all works smooth.
Yep, that's the goal.
Yeah. We've all
That's very modern of you to do that. I congratulate you on including command box in there, because that's the way to use ColdFusion these days.
And it's a lot easier to install than the instructions they had, where it's go download the developer edition of ACF and do all these things to set it up, whereas command box will make it so much easier.
Yep. I think the main goal in that is to kind of remove a barrier of entry and try and streamline getting people involved. If you just say, hey, install command box, do this, and then you're up and running, versus here's 50 instructions on how to get it up and running, makes it much simpler and much easier for somebody to just jump in and do.
Would you say this is kind of basic ColdFusion or intermediate or advanced, or what kind of, when someone's completed this, how will they?
I would say it's basic to intermediate. There are some small advanced things in it. But it was intended to be a jumping off point for getting somebody going with ColdFusion. So we wanted to avoid as much of the advanced concepts as much as possible. I mean, there's stuff in there like object orientation, ORM, stuff like that, but nothing super advanced, just for lack of, whatever you would consider super advanced. we kind of, we dummied it down, but don't take that in the wrong way.
Yeah, I mean, things you might need to do in your first app, or if you were maintaining an app, stuff you'd need to know.
Yeah.
I mean, looking through the table of contents for it does seem to have some intermediate things in there, like caching and security and internationalization and all kinds of cool stuff. So, and I see you have a what to do next section. So when people have finished it, you give them some guidance on where to go. They want to learn more. So that is very cool. So you said you've put developers, non-ColdFusion programmers through this, and they've come out after a week, 40 hours of studying and doing the examples. And did they need, help from another developer, or they basically were able to do it all on their own using this course?
As far as I know, everybody's been able to make it through on their own.
Wow. That must mean you wrote the course really well.
God, I hope so.
I'll be honest, being somebody, the first time I looked at this and you look at the names, if you go on here and you look at the names of the original list, they were all people that were well-known, well-respected in the community 5 years ago, when they were all either at conferences or you went online and you were looking up information, and there they were. Those were the people. So, and that's why when some of them left, we still tried to find some names in the community that people would recognize. whether they're newer in the community or that are blogging a lot or at conferences, just because it's nice to see that name out there to help you out to know, okay, I've met them at a conference or I see them blogging. They should know what they're talking about. Even me, even my name's crazy enough.
Some people slide through.
Yeah, but you were part of the Adobe CF Summit East keynote, Dan. So now you're famous. Before you were anonymous, but
Yes. I'm not so sure I'm famous for keeping my time within 8 minutes, but hey, we all have our problems.
It's all downhill from here, Dan.
Absolutely.
I'll say for myself, I've been working with ColdFusion for a long time, and reviewing the site and working with Dave and Dan on this. There are parts of ColdFusion that I've never used. I just haven't had to in my day-to-day job, and so I found the sections on like document handling and ORM actually were useful to me, even though I've been using ColdFusion a long time. Those are features that I've never really taken advantage of. So, from that perspective, I thought it was helpful for someone who's got an advanced experience with ColdFusion. Maybe there are pieces of it that have never been used or never been needed before, and this is a good way to get your toes wet with those particular features.
And I know I've read the downloaded course and book 3 or 4 times because there's always something that I need to catch up on, or you go out and you do a Google search for something you're looking for, and half the time it does bring up Learn CF in a Week. So there's the way it was written was good enough where Google finds a lot of information in it. So it's yeah.
And it's interesting when you look at the table of contents for the course. There was, if I remember back, there were, I think, about 2 or 3 months of discussion over that list. And there was a lot of thought that went into the order of that list as well. Trying to walk somebody through going from just starting to making something full blown to adding other things along the way to enhance the application. So while we're just basically fixing it to make it current, the initial groundwork took a long time to make it so all we have to do now is just fix the examples and make it look prettier.
I think one of the advantages of this this course over some of the other learning materials that have been out there for years, like the old CF web application construction kit, the CF WAC books. These examples are a little bit more clean. We've updated the code to also reflect more modern coding practices wherever possible, using script in lieu of tags whenever possible. So I think that coming into this as your first learning opportunity for ColdFusion, you will be better positioned to code in the more modern standards, and not the way that things have been taught for years, where everything's in a CFM page, where everything's brittle and hard to maintain over the lifespan of an application. I think it lays a good groundwork for someone to start off on the right foot with developing with ColdFusion.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's good to point out too is this wasn't written by like a document writer for developers. This was written by developers for developers. So the writers knew the audience right out the gate, which definitely geared it more towards a different style of writing to make it way more understandable for the intended audience.
That is great. How is it on, you said you've updated the examples. Does it talk about some of the new features in CF 2018 or, not really? Kind of classic ColdFusion?
Yeah, I think we redid the examples to be current, but I don't think we actually went out and included anything that's
I don't think so either. We've talked about doing some more, and we realized with our initial time constraints that we had put on ourselves originally, that we wanted to just do what we had, and we've thrown the idea around about doing getting more people to work on an advanced topic. So things like your closures and your member functions and getting into query execute and getting into API and frameworks themselves and dependency injection and more things like that then can take this into like a 200 level course instead of just a 100 to 150 level course.
And keep in mind, the intended audience was getting somebody that had little to no experience to being able to write code or look at code and know what they were looking at. So in thinking along those lines, when we were looking at making it more current, we didn't really need to take any of the new stuff that's been added since it was originally written and add all this new stuff that's been added to the language. Granted, yeah, we need to make the examples current, but we don't need to add in all the stuff because all that new stuff doesn't help you learn the basics of the language.
Makes sense. So this is to get you started, and then you can hit the ground running if you have to use some of those newer features.
And I can say one of the biggest things we did talk about was we really did want to move it away. I guess move it away is a bad word, but do more with CF script. I think the original authors did a great job of adding script in there. I think we wanted to make that the focus, because you take somebody from a different language, a JavaScript, for example, or whatnot, that happens to tie into that and tie into a ColdFusion backend, they'll understand it better because it's similar to what they're used to. So if we are bringing somebody from a different language, it might just make more sense to them than reading tags. Whereas us coming from doing this forever, tags was our first understanding.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, one of the chapters specifically, I think it's the one that deals with mail. I believe that the original author has revised it, so we actually got the same person to come back and revisit it. And I believe he rewrote all of the code examples in script. So all of the tag stuff is now removed from there's like one example with tags and the whole rest of it is now in script. So I think that's a little bit more, it gives new users a better match to other languages they may be familiar with, JavaScript or other scripting languages, object-oriented scripting languages. It'll be a little bit more familiar to them.
Yeah, and I think I did the same thing when I redid the data handling section, where now it's all script first, and then here's some tag examples if you need them, but it's all focusing on script, trying to make it more, like Dan said, more relatable to everybody else.
I think that's a great thing to have, start with the script, but also have some examples with tags, because some people are going to be maintaining some legacy ColdFusion code, and they are going to encounter tags in the wild.
Yep. You can't write everything in script. There are times where you need tags.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
So you mentioned programmers from other languages have been able to use this to come up to speed really fast in ColdFusion, and a week is like incredible. I know I read an Adobe in the Adobe Evangelism Kit, they said to learn Java from scratch is months of time typically. So that's a real productivity boost there.
Yeah.
What about? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was saying, if you have programming background, picking up another language isn't that hard, depending on how it's presented to you to learn. And I think that's where how we presented it to learn to somebody that knows some programming makes it very easy for them to jump in and start and get going.
Do you cover things that might be gotchas for someone coming from another language, where another language approaches things a bit differently, or?
I don't believe we do.
No, I think it is just straight up ColdFusion, how it's written. That might be something interesting to think about if we do get around to a advanced version, having certain things, especially like when you get into your closures, for example, your map, reduce, filter eaches. There might be slightly differences in how a JavaScript handles it or another language, and maybe that would be the type of place where we would throw something like that in there.
I mean, that's more too also for the people, the end user, that if they want to see, hey, I'm used to writing Java, or I'm used to writing, sorry, bad example. If I'm used to writing like PHP and I have to send mail in PHP, can you give me an example of a PHP way to a ColdFusion way so I can make the relationship? I mean, that's something if people want it. I mean, I don't see any problem with us doing it. It's just not something we would actually. I don't think anybody's ever asked for, or until I don't think now we've ever actually brought up.
Yeah.
So you talk about, people who program in other languages using this to learn it. Is it realistic for someone who's coming from a design or an HTML background to use this to learn ColdFusion, or is it not designed that way? Or
I would say it is perfect for that because of the first couple chapters talking about the basics. And if I remember correctly, the first chapter does do script and tag right next to each other. So when you see a tag, it'll make a lot of sense to, I think, a person who comes from a front end understanding what an HTML tags are like. So personally, I would say yes.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea how many people have used this to learn ColdFusion?
I wish we had statistics, but no, unfortunately. Wasn't baked into the original version.
I do know over the last 5 years or so, you hear people talk about it. So I know, I've had at different jobs that I've been at, last 2 or 3 jobs since it's been out there. I know I've mentioned anybody I've talked to that wanted to understand anything about CF, I say, go here first. Or, hey, I want to learn a little bit more about it. Go here first. So we don't have numbers, but I know that you see it out there. You see people talk about it, and I've heard people talk about it. So I think that it has reached a large audience.
Cool. So I'm kind of curious, if people didn't use this, what other ways could they do to learn ColdFusion?
Trial and error.
How effective is that?
Probably not, because you don't really know how things interconnect and why they interconnect. You can go to like CF docs and stuff like that to learn what the tags are, but you really don't know when or why to use certain tags. And that's kind of what Learn CF in a Week helps me with, is the why.
I mean, there's a couple books here and there. To pump up the Ortis team, I know Luis, who loves to write books all the time. I know he wrote a Learn CF in 100 minutes or something like that. So people here and there have written various either long blog posts or a couple books and whatnot. But there's not. I don't think there's ever really been since you had the WAC books, which were just enormous. Since then, I don't think there really was any let's go here type of place. I think you would have to go and find hodgepodge of stuff and try to take a whole bunch of examples and blog posts and sort of put them together and try to figure it out. So I know once this was put together, that's, to me, has been that first source to go to for everybody.
And then there are training courses you can take on ColdFusion. There's I forget the name of it. Fast Track to ColdFusion, I think is the name of one of them.
That's right. Over the last 2 years, Adobe's put together a few of those, or they've had people put together some of those. And then the new certification course they're putting together that's going to start at
Summit, right? Yeah.
Yes. So I'm going to, and I know that, what was it, a couple years, maybe 3 years ago, where the Adobe ColdFusion team tried to put together a quote unquote college course that was about web development that used sort of ColdFusion as a back end. So they understand that they need to get into places, and I know there's a few colleges or whatnot that had done some work with those courses. So there is some stuff out there, but not nearly probably as much as we should have out there for a language that's as simple as this to just get started.
And when I looked at that college curriculum, it seemed to be written for an older version of ColdFusion. Maybe I didn't have the right.
That's the
thing, so it needs updating.
Yeah, as we've learned, that's one of the harder parts about writing a how-to. It's keeping it current.
I think a lot of these concepts came about with CF11. I think that's probably around the time between CF11 and 2016. It's like when the Slack channel became a big deal, because a lot of the community really wanted to start to communicate with each other. And so I think there's been an emphasis more on learning and training and how to get that revitalized in the community again.
And then, of course, there are conferences you can go to learn specific things once you've done this. And I think you have a whole reference section in the course that says, here are conferences you can go to, here are user groups, and all kinds of other things. So
And that's another reason why the site needs to be updated, because when you have certain things in there with user groups or conferences that have either unfortunately gone away or gone on to hiatus for a while, we need to make sure that stuff's updated.
And podcasts too, come to mention it.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You used to run the CFR podcast, right?
200 plus episodes strong. Yep.
Wow. That's it. You should get a medal, man.
It was many, many years.
Yes.
Working with Scott Stroh's enough is...
Yes. All good things must come to an end.
Indeed.
And then you've started your podcast here, and I know the Orders team has started doing their podcast, and so people have taken up the torch for Dave and Scott.
Absolutely. So any other things you're thinking for the future of Learn CF in a Week? You mentioned a few things already, but
yeah, we definitely, I think one of the main things we kicked around a lot was adding, taking the sections we've got and adding an advanced to each of them. So we go a little deeper into some just beyond the surface type things. That's one thing we're definitely going to look at doing. That's a little harder because we don't want people to go through those in the initial run of the course, because they will be outside of the scope of the course. But it's more of, hey, here's how to do like a query, but here's how to do something way more advanced with queries. But it's not part of the course. It's more just a add-on to teach you some other things.
maybe it needs to be a bonus section, or learn CF in a second week, or I don't know what you call it.
Yeah, we talk about like adding week 2 or something like that.
Does it keep track of what bits you've learned and where you've, do you like have a way you can check off, I've done that bit, so you can see what's left? Or
currently no, but if you're going through the course and creating the app that it helps you create, or the app that helps you go through, you would know where you are based on that.
Makes sense. Any other thoughts from anyone on what's coming in the future for Learn CF in a week?
I think we've talked to a few different people. Like at Summit East, I talked to Charlie Earhart, who was more than willing to review things or work with us on resources, since Charlie puts 2 or 3 resources on his website hourly, I think. So working with,
it seems like that.
Yes, working with him and working with other community members, maybe working with Adobe on some things with it. Just over this last 45 minutes of talking, I'm sure some things with statistics and whatnot, maybe we'll think about, just so we can see how it's going.
And I know at least I did, I don't know about you guys, but I submitted to Adobe about having a discussion about Learn CF at CF Summit.
That is a great idea.
So maybe have like a roundtable discussion or what have you as a session, don't know.
Maybe a meetup or
something
session. Get them to put it on the keynote slide somewhere.
Yeah.
Because they did that at CF Summit East, so I don't see why they shouldn't do it again.
That's because I was part of it, and I know.
I
was a little obnoxious about that.
Well, sometimes you have to be persistent to get things to happen.
Persistent. Maybe I should use persistent as a better word for that.
Yes. Yeah. So if anyone is listening here wants to help out in some way, how could they help? What do they need to do? Can they contact you, or are there particular things you want help with? Or?
Well, once it's up, you just go to Learn CF in a week. You'll know that it's the new site because looks like Bootstrap. When it doesn't look like if it doesn't look like Bootstrap, it's still the old system, and it'll look a whole lot different. It'll look a lot more modern. When it's there, there'll be some information on how to get involved, whether it's a pull request to add things to the site, to make fixes, changes, so on and so forth. The site itself was written in ColdBox, and that source will be available too. So if somebody sees an error in the site and they want to help out, they can help with that too.
And of course, telling their friends about Learn CF in a week would always be helpful.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
I'm sure we'll put other contact people on there like ourselves if we choose to, and talking to some of the.
We're all going to be on there, but the emails all go to Dan.
I love getting emails. They're great. Then I will forward my email box over to Dave so he can learn all about what's going on with my children.
So excited.
At a 3-hour time difference, which makes it even better.
I think we also had a Google group set up for
Yeah.
those who were helping us with the revision, and I think when we're all done, we're going to open up that Google group and probably link to it from the site. So that will be another place where people can talk, ask questions if they're running into trouble, get help.
Right.
So I think it'll be a good channel for keeping track of suggestions and things like that as well.
Definitely.
And hopefully
That's a great idea.
Hopefully we just do a better job as us three or as a community as a whole of, because it's going to be more open with it being in GitHub and the Google groups and other things to if we see the next version, when the next version comes out and we see something that should be updated, that people are more engaged and more involved with trying to help keep it up to date instead of just leaving it to the original authors who, as we said, a bunch of them did move on into other fields from ColdFusion or just didn't have time anymore to be a part of it. And so kind of, hopefully it won't fall by the wayside anymore.
That's a great thing. And it's great that you've got multiple people working on it. So if someone gets busy or burnt out, the project keeps going. Now you mentioned command box earlier. You have that now in the install section. Have you considered whether you'd have anything about using containers in ColdFusion? Because that's a pretty hot topic these days. And
It is, but that would probably fall more on the advanced side.
Yeah.
However cool it is cool. It creates another barrier of entry if you have to teach somebody what containers are and how to use them.
We did talk about the idea, or maybe I brought that up originally when we were throwing about how to build this and put this together for somebody locally, and I thought about that. I think and when we threw that idea around, I think I talked or maybe emailed some of the Ortus guys because they had that containers, and it sounded like it was a little bit more trouble than it's worth, or maybe it was Carl that said when he did one of the sessions at Summit and they tried to use containers, it did have some issues in terms of computers and operating systems and everything. So for the site itself, that kind of took a back seat, but the idea of putting it into an advanced section, the idea of us saying week 2 where we can talk about frameworks, for example, and how to put things together, and then using containers and what command box is and getting that kind of stuff out there to give people an idea, not necessarily to use it, but to show them, hey, here's certain ways to be able to put it together. Yeah,
like you said, Dan, like the main course doesn't even go into using frameworks at all. Although I'm a huge advocate of using them, we don't talk about them at all in the basic course.
Maybe I think the idea of a separate advanced course or however you put it together is a great idea. And maybe you could have something in the basic course that says, hey, here are some things you might come across if you're maintaining an app. And check out the advanced course if you want to learn about them. But I think you're wise not to cram the basics course full of, advanced things.
Yeah. It's a
it occurs to me, you've already got a section. Yeah, it is. I noticed you have a section on security in there, which is cool. Maybe in the advanced thing, you could talk about the new performance manager or the API manager or deploying to the topics that come to mind there. So, and also, I don't know where ForgeBox would fit into this, but I know Ortus is making a big push for people to contribute packages and reuse code. Yep. So, and I think you had a section on reuse, don't you?
Code reuse, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's more, I think, in using CFCs, if I recall.
I think if we had if we do an advanced and we have a section on command box, I think ForgeBox would be a good discussion under that, because that really the two things tie together so well. Especially with just being able to use command box to install packages from ForgeBox with almost zero resistance. I mean, it's equivalent to how Node npm package manager works, but probably even a little better. So, but I think, that's not something that's really would fit into the beginning.
No, it's not a beginner thing.
Audience, yeah.
So, cool. Anything else you want to share about CF in a week before we go to the final set of questions on ColdFusion?
I do want to say that with State of the CF Union coming out, which I think the whole community thanks you for doing that every year. I know for some of the sessions I put into for Summit this year, I used that as a big key place to figure out places our community is lacking. And I think that will help us when we talk about doing an advanced version of looking at that and saying, okay, where are places that we should talk a little bit more about? I know from the surveys that you see a lot of people don't use frameworks, or a lot of people don't know what dependency injection is. So being able to use the community as a driver to help us with some of these things should also be very, very helpful for us.
Or source control, as someone blogged about in a somewhat rageful way a few years ago.
Yes.
I'll leave him nameless. But,
No, I would like to take a second to thank a lot of the people that are involved in this. Because you see us three, there's a lot of people that are involved. For example, like let's see, Nick Tunney, who else? Paul Hastings, Tim Cunningham. I'm gonna butcher his name. Goost. Who knows how to pronounce that right?
Goose. Forget his last name now.
Yeah, I'm terrible at names.
I'll when the page loads, I'll have a go.
I'll take a stab at it, and I think it's New and Hughes. But
there you go.
That I probably just slaughtered it, so my apologies.
And then who else? Matt Gifford. We
got
Matt Gifford out of the bells of somewhere to help us out.
We got Matt Clemente, one of the newer guys, has come in. He redid a whole chapter. Masha.
Yep.
Am I blanking on her last name?
Masha Eden.
Thank you. She came in and did a lot of reviewing of ORM, since she's done multiple talks on that at summits. So
we even dragged Dan Wilson back from Native Script Land to help out.
Yes, that's true.
So yeah, it was a good mixture of the old and the new, and that's kind of the idea of going forward with a second version to get a lot of people, newer people that are out there that are really doing stuff that we're seeing really coming out lately that might really be passionate about helping out too.
And also my wife, oddly enough, my wife proofreads the whole thing.
Wow.
Now my wife's an educator, so she helps us out by proofreading everything to make sure we know how to spell and use proper grammar, because we're programmers and don't use that most of the time.
That is great. Well, it sounds like a really high quality way to learn ColdFusion, incredible price. So I'd suggest everyone listening, check out learncfinaweek.com. Even if you already know ColdFusion, like Carl was saying, you may have learned some new stuff in there that you didn't know already, or maybe you just want to share it, social share about it with your friends, or blog about it. I'll help get the word out on this. So let's turn to the questions I ask all my guests, which is, why are you proud to use ColdFusion?
Or should I borrow their tagline and say, because it makes easy things hard? Or hard things easy? Hard things easy.
If it makes hard
things easy. I did that in the backwards. You know what I meant? Edit this out. Makes hard things easy. No, that's their tagline. They've had that since the dawn of time, if I recall. No, for me, I've had a great career so far. Being a ColdFusion developer for well over 20 years now. I started back in ColdFusion 1.5, which most people didn't even know existed.
Oh, good old DBML.
Oh yeah, yep. Back when you didn't have executable directories and you had to do weird stuff to get code to run. So I've been doing it for a very long time. I've had a really good career out of it. And I love it because, like I said, using their line, it makes a lot of the hardness that I have to do on a day-to-day basis a lot simpler, so I can focus more on solutions than how to write code.
Go ahead, Carl.
Well, so in my day-to-day job, ColdFusion's about, 25% or less of what I do on a daily basis, but it allows me to do what I do quickly and effectively. None of the work that I do is visible from the public. It's all internal for the agency I work for. But it saves the products that I'm able to produce fairly quickly, save effort, save time, get information in people's hands quickly. And so from that perspective, ColdFusion has just made that part of my job so much easier.
And for me, it pays the bills. I didn't, there's so many of us probably in the computer field that didn't start off in computers when we were in college or even before that, and got into this, and it's been fun. It's been enjoyable. Being in the DC area, I get into a lot of government contracts, so I've seen a lot of good and a lot of bad in the government, not just what you see in the news, but helping. Building these sites that, for example, the site that I work on now is a child welfare, child adoption type of site for the government. And to know that Ray Camden and his family, it's a place that they use a lot. So to be able to put a face and a name to your site and knowing that it's helpful to people has always been something that I've enjoyed. And being able to do it with ColdFusion, which is simple and easy, because I didn't come from a computer background. So to be able to get up and running with it's been enjoyable. And now I get into with you guys, all of you, and get into these kind of things. And I work under some people that have a lot of intense pressure and a lot of advanced features, and I get crushed a lot, and I'm enjoying it because of that. So the basics are great. Learning the advanced stuff with ColdFusion, because there's so much of it in there. And it has helped me personally to understand other languages when I've looked at NativeScript, or I've looked at Vue, or I've had to look at Angular, or reading Ruby at one of my jobs. I could understand what they were doing. Even if I didn't understand the syntax per se, I could understand, oh, this is a loop and here's what it's doing. And so a simple language like this is really simple but powerful language has really helped me understand a lot of my career.
Yeah, I think one of the keys, like several of you said, is it makes hard things easy. And sometimes people look down on it because it's like, oh, this is too easy. But really, it lets you do a lot of heavy lifting in fewer lines of code. Mm-hmm. And, if you're writing modern CF, like you're updating Learn CF in a week for, this language can beat any other language's socks off, particularly if you're using command box and some of the other modern tools and techniques to do it. So,
yeah, I think one of the other thing, it's like somebody said once that this is old, so I know it's not current with all other languages currently, but I remember back in the day somebody was saying to send an email in ColdFusion is one line of code, where in other languages you have to install a module, you have to write all this, you have to write this, and this, and then an hour later you might be able to send an email.
Yeah, that's I think still true to a great extent. The other thing is, I know Adobe puts in a lot of effort into security. I was just talking to Suresh, who's, in charge of the development there. And I couldn't believe how much effort they go to make sure it's secure.
Yeah, I mean, knock on wood, it's been a long time since they've had a 0 day.
Yeah, I think they've only had one in the last 6 years, whereas some other languages have had quite a few.
Quite a few. Yeah. I think PHP's had one in like the past 10 minutes, maybe. I joke, but that one's probably pegged more than any language for exploits.
And I'm not somebody who's been into a lot of other language, but you look at the two, I guess you could call the two main security czars, where we had Dave Epler before he moved on to InVision and moved off of CF, and then Pete Freitag and all the stuff he's doing. I mean, these guys are making it so much easier for this language not to have these problems, because they're
follow the lockdown guides.
Follow lockdown guides, and if you saw today the Fixinator webinar, which I'm sure will be out there for Adobe to watch, it's fascinating and to see the stuff that Pete's doing and the ideas that people gave him in the middle of the webinar. Where it's like, oh well, I'll think about that. I got more things to do and this and this. So,
well, and Fixinator, as you probably know, is written in ColdFusion and it actually runs serverless up on the cloud. So very modern architecture, very economical. Amazing stuff. He gave a talk on that at Into the Box. That was fascinating. So let's turn to what would it take to make ColdFusion more alive this year?
more people to use this course that we've spent a lot of time working on.
I second that. Plus, I'd say getting another record number of people out at Summit in Vegas because I think they had a very large crowd at Summit East, which is a positive. I think every year it's gotten bigger. If we continue to grow Summit and it gets over 500 or more people.
I think every year Summit West has grown, except for the 1 year when it was right after the event that happened in Vegas.
Yes.
And they had a large amount of cancellations, but I think beyond that, it's been a positive return every year.
And I think it's for me personally, it's finding the right sessions for people, such as I said, following CF Union survey and finding places that are holes in a lot of the community not to say for them to use it, because I know we have a lot of old systems, but to understand it.
Yep.
To see where it might benefit them. That will make the community more alive because they will start seeing the technology, not just knowing that, well, everything's in CF includes and custom tags, but there's other ways to do it that'll make it more efficient.
Mm-hmm. A lot of times I think CF gets a bad rap because of bad coding, not bad language.
Yes.
And if people take a step back and look at the code that was used to write quote unquote bad app, and they took some time to correct some of that, I bet their bad app would run considerably better.
And more securely.
Yep. But the quick thing is to blame the language instead, unfortunately.
Yeah. How about you, Carl? What would it take to make ColdFusion more live this year?
I think I agree with what Dave and Dan said. I think as many people that come to Summit, I've been to every one so far. I always learn a whole lot of new things each year. It's a great community, and I think continuing to foster that community, get on the Slack team, hang out in there, even if you're not programming today. Just hang out in there. I learned so much just by osmosis, just by following the threads and the discussions. And everybody is eager to help each other out. So that's one of the great things I like about ColdFusion and the community is that it's inclusive and it's very supportive. And so even someone who's brand new and it's okay to pepper people with questions on the Slack channel or use the forums. The nice thing about the forums is that they're theoretically forever, whereas Slack is sort of threads and discussions fall out over time because we're using the free tier of Slack, but that real-time interaction, even if you're in a remote worker, even if you are in an organization where maybe you're the only programmer, like where I work, I'm the only one doing ColdFusion, but by staying in the Slack team, I feel like I'm part of the greater community, and I always can talk to people. I can always throw questions out there and bounce ideas around. So I think that the more people that get in there and stay in there and continue to be involved, the better.
Yep, and to dovetail on a little bit what Carl was saying there too is, in trying to if you see something in like a forum or Slack, don't be afraid, even if you're new, to respond. You may have the answer somebody's looking for because you may have stumbled across that the day before that they had no idea about. So you don't need to sit there and look at these forums or Slack, like I said, and wait for a quote unquote expert or seasoned veteran to answer a question. If you feel you can have input, answer it. Even if you don't be afraid to give the wrong answer because it could spur conversation. Absolutely.
I mean, we don't really have as Carl said, the community is very open. We had our couple people that were not the best in terms of communicating what they meant. Their heart was in the right place. Their wording was not quite the best. And some of that has been removed. So as you said, put the wrong answer up if you think that it's your right answer, because it'll actually help you if somebody comes back and says, actually, you almost were there. It should be this. And then you're learning too, and it's making you better.
Never afraid to be wrong. Never be afraid to be wrong, because you'll learn more from being wrong than you will be from being right.
And along those lines, if you do go to a conference or you get onto the Slack channel, don't be afraid to communicate. Don't be afraid to walk up to a Dave Ferguson who you've seen on post, or a Pete Freitag, or a Luis Mahano, or others, and talk to them. Or you're sitting at a table at one of these conferences, just open up and start talking, because more often than not, you're going to find something common, or you're going to figure out, oh, that person's got an interesting idea, or they know somebody that I should go talk to. The amount of times at the conferences that's happened for me, where I've met new people, or I've been able to put people in touch with people, it's just a great thing to be able to do.
Yep. I think I've learned more at conferences, especially CF Summit, having hallway conversations versus sitting in sessions.
Yep. Not to say the sessions aren't great.
No. Yeah, true. Don't take that the wrong way.
So, Carl, you were going to say something, I think, earlier.
No. I think whatever I was going to say, I think one of the others has already brought up. So I'm good.
Oh, they read your mind. Okay. So when folks are at CF Summit, is there any way they can recognize people on the Learn CF in a Week team?
We should get T-shirts.
I think that's an excellent idea.
I got to talk to Adobe. Maybe Adobe will foot the bill.
Yeah,
there you go.
All of whatever on Vistaprint. Yeah.
hopefully by October, we will have the new site up and running, and the contributors page will be expanded, and there should be photos of, hopefully more up-to-date photos of everybody. I know some of the photos that are up there are from back then are a little out of date, but
less people want to keep the hair they had back then.
I'm still going with the old haired picture of me. Period.
So if folks want to find you online, how would they best do that?
Oh, for me, the best way is just on Twitter. I'm on Twitter all the time. I have Twitter running all the time, and that's just at DF Grumpy on Twitter. I'm actually at DF Grumpy almost everywhere. If you find it, that's probably me.
Cool.
Yeah,
How about you, Dan?
Go ahead, Carl.
No, I'm at CF Vonner, VONNER, and I'm using that handle pretty much everywhere. GitHub, Slack, and Twitter.
I am FMDano74 on Twitter, and if you find FM Dano out there, it's probably me.
What does the FM stand for? I get the Dano, but
is this safe for
is it
kids?
embarrassing?
No. I was part of a running social drinking group called the Hash House Harriers. So that it's a worldwide organization.
So that's how many pints of beer you drank? 74 pints when you ran?
Well, 74 was when I was born. So somebody already had FM Dano on Twitter. So I had to come up with something else. And FM Dano is sort of an acronym for a nickname that we had in the group. And we'll leave it at that.
There you go. And I think you run a user group too, don't you, Dan?
Yes, it's been a little bit dormant, but I'm starting to come up with some ideas here. I've had some people talk to me about it. You've mentioned speaking at it. I run the Northern Virginia ColdFusion user group. We literally, when I ran it for 5 years before we sort of hit a little lull. My wife went back to grad school, so it got a little bit busy with the children. But thinking about getting things going again. I've got a couple ideas here, and a couple people have mentioned ideas as well. So hopefully I can get that back up and going. Quickly with that is I always run it through Adobe Connect as well. So you don't have to be present. I've had people from various places in the world be a part of it. DC traffic is so horrible that I know people that live 5 miles away that can't make it to my office. So they'll sit at home, have their glass of scotch, and enjoy a good presentation. So hopefully we'll be back up and running.
And then, of course, we also need to remind people that the website they need to check for learning ColdFusion is learncfinaweek.com. So shortly to be updated and amazingly modern and wonderful.
Absolutely.
So, hopefully. Cross fingers.
Well, thanks so much for putting all this time and effort in. You know, I know you don't get monetary reward, but I think you do get a lot of appreciation from the ColdFusion community. I know I'm appreciative of what you do for this.
Well, with companies need hires and they can find ColdFusion people because we help them a little bit, then that's a bonus for everybody.
Yep.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
No problem. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yes. Thanks for bringing us all on here. I know you had mentioned it to me first, but I'm glad you were able to get the other two on because they've done more than I have with this. So I want to make sure that they get the credit they deserve.